This sounds this is the thing I really think matters for the effects.
In this first of two videos, I'm taking a look at what I like, what I don't like, and what I think could be improved on the Mixcast 4, Tascam's new mixing console designed specifically for podcasting and live streaming. Now, before we get too deep, I want to thank Tascam for sending me a Mixcast 4 to use and review. Here we go. I've had the Mixcast 4 for a few weeks now, and the one question I've gotten over and over from my podcaster friends is it a Rodecaster Pro killer? Which, honestly, is a fair question, especially if you see them side by side. While they're similar in what they do, I think the best way I can answer is to say objectively no, but it might be for you depending on what features you're looking for. For example, if you want combo jacks instead of straight XLR inputs, the Mixcast wins. Or if you want preamps with enough headroom to drive gain-hungry mics without a FET head or a cloud lifter, or you need built-in USB delay for live streaming, the Mixcast wins again. But if you need USB MIDI for DAW control or the ability to use sound pads to switch scenes in OBS, the Rodecaster wins. So it really does depend on your use case. Now, this video isn't meant to be a head-to-head comparison, nor is it simply a rundown of every feature and spec of the Mixcast. If that's what you're looking for, head over to Tascam.com or click the link in the description. In part 2, I'll break down my own podcast workflow and we'll listen to sound samples on different mics using some of the built-in effects so you can see and hear how I use the Mixcast. So what do I like about it? Well, right off the bat, I love the way this thing looks. I love the overall design, and the layout just makes sense. From what I can tell, it's an all-plastic chassis. There may be metal internally, I don't know. But the build feels solid, and as you can see from the way I've lit it here, the fit and finish is terrific. There are LEDs on each of the channels that double as clipping indicators, which is a nice touch. And the colors of the first 4 channels correspond to the colors of the headphone volume knobs, so there's no question as to which headphones go to which channel. I don't use the sound pads, but I appreciate the placement of them just to the right of the faders. It makes them easily accessible, but also leaves room for the touchscreen, which is fantastic. It's big, it's vibrant, and it's pretty responsive. So let's take a look at 4 of my favorite features of the Mixcast 4. The first one is dB meters, which was just added in the recent 1.2 update. Prior to 1.2, the level meters just showed a basic dot pattern with no real indication as to what they represented. With dB meters, you can set more accurate levels, which will give you better recordings. I'd love to see Tascam add LUF meters as well, but adding dB meters is definitely a step in the right direction. Another favorite feature, also from the 1.2 update, is the addition of shortcuts to effects and processing. Before the update, you had to go through multiple button presses to get to the effects on a given input. Now, you just tap the channel number and you're there, which is a nice time saver. And it works across all channels, including USB, TRRS, and Bluetooth. While we're on the effects, it's worth noting that the built-in effects sound terrific, but I think the way they're displayed could be improved. As you can see, there are tone presets for deep, mid, and bright, which are supposed to correspond to the type of voice you have. But what if your voice is somewhere in between? I know there's also a manual option which gives you the ability to tweak individual settings for bass, treble, and the exciter, but the presets don't give you any indication as to what settings are being used to create them. So if you like the way deep sounds, but you'd like to add a bit of sparkle on the high end, since the presets don't show you the settings, you have to first guess or go through trial and error to get to the deep starting point before you can then add that sparkle. So I'd like to see Tascam treat the presets the same way they treat manual, in that you can see what the actual settings are and then tweak them to taste, at which point they become a custom setting. The same goes for the compressor. You have soft, hard, and manual. I happen to think that soft sounds good on my voice, but I have no idea what settings are being used to get there. I'd also like to see the static icon that's really just taking up screen space to the left of the settings replaced with live meters that actually show how and when the compressor is kicking in. As it is now, you're just sort of flying blind, especially if you're unfamiliar with what these parameters mean. And Tascam, a master compressor would be really cool too. Number 3 on my favorite features is gain adjustment on external sources, USB, TRRS, and Bluetooth. And again, this was added in 1.2. Out of the box, you had no control over the gain, and I actually found the USB levels a little low in some of my first recordings. Being able to adjust them and get the levels into that sweet spot and then tweak to taste with the fader is a nice addition. Number 4 is TRRS input. One of the things missing from my workflow was the ability to record someone on a mobile phone. I've got a couple new shows in the planning stages, and being able to record an actual phone call is a key component. The Mixcast has a TRRS input that creates a mix minus for doing just that, although I'm also an iPhone user, which means I need to use an adapter, but it works perfectly, especially with the new gain adjustment. So what don't I like about the Mixcast 4? Honestly, not much. The biggest problem I have with it is the abysmal transfer speed in getting files from it to the computer. I recently recorded an episode of my show Process Driven, and to get the 8GB file, actually it was 2 files because the Mixcast has a file size limit of 4 GB, but that's another story. But to transfer 8GB to my Mac took just under 19 minutes. And it's the same whether you drag and drop from Finder or you use the included Tascam podcast editor app. The advantage of using Finder is that you can cancel if you need to. The podcast editor app doesn't allow you to abort the transfer regardless of how many times you click the cancel button. I've tried multiple cables, multiple cards, all with the same results. The Mixcast is supposed to be a USB 2 high-speed device, which has a maximum transfer rate of 480 megabits or 60 megabytes per second, meaning that 8GB file should have taken about 2.5 minutes, not 19. And I've confirmed this with a friend who also has a Mixcast and is getting similar results. So until this gets sorted, and honestly, I don't even know that it can be, maybe it's a hardware issue, I'll continue to use Audio Hijack for my main recording and just use the Mixcast recording as a backup. Using Audio Hijack also has the advantage of being able to record in AIFF or MP3, not just the Polywave format used by the Mixcast. The included Tascam podcast editor is also something I'm not really a fan of. It's clumsy and just not ready for prime time. I love the idea of it, but Tascam, if you're going to include a piece of software, it should at least be as good, if not better, than what's already available. And in this case, there's a fair bit of work to do before it's either. If Tascam would actually put some time and money into the editor, I think they could have a terrific all-in-one ecosystem. But as it stands, you're better off using something like Reaper or Audition or Logic. There's one other thing that might just be a bug, but with the headphone volume set to 0, I can still hear a tiny bit of audio bleeding through. It's faint, but it's there, and it happens on all 4 of the headphone outputs. I thought it might just be my unit, but I've confirmed it with the same friend who confirmed the transfer speeds, and his unit does the same thing. There's also a weird pumping of the audio that you can hear when ducking is enabled, but I need to spend a little more time with it to try and figure out what's going on. I've mentioned a few things that I think could be added or improved, but I'd also like to see a multiband EQ with a spectrum analyzer because, as it is, I think the simple bass and treble controls are just too limiting for really dialing in EQ. I'd also like to see something like the Rodecaster Pro's producer mode. The Mixcast currently has a feature called Talkback, which allows the person on mic 1 to talk to mics 2, 3, and 4 without being recorded. Great for letting hosts or guests know that they need to wrap it up or change topics. But producer mode takes it a step further and allows you to press mute and solo on mic 1 and also on USB or TRRS and have an offline conversation, which is a fantastic feature for, say, allowing a producer to set up a call before bringing it into the recorded conversation. So, Tascam, you're halfway there with Talkback. Now just add something like producer mode to complete the loop. I think export options on the editor should be expanded. At the moment, there's no mono option, and you can't save an MP3 lower than 128K or higher than 256. There's also no way to add metadata like show names or cover art, which seems like a pretty big omission for something that should ostensibly be upload ready. Maybe Tascam could take another cue from Rode and break the SoundPad editor and the exporter out as one utility and make the podcast editor a separate app. I'll go into more detail on the editor and the effects in part 2. Overall, I think the Mixcast 4 is a terrific piece of kit. It's a fantastic solution for doing in-studio podcasts with multiple hosts or guests. It's also great for podcasters who aren't super geeky about audio but still want to make great sounding shows. And if you want to take remote callers, again, the Mixcast is a terrific solution, and it's even better now that you have gain control over external sources. The short version is that there's a lot to love about the Mixcast 4. And if the 1.2 firmware update is any indication of what's to come, I think it's just going to get better. If there's anything I missed or you want to know more about something I did talk about, leave a question or a comment below and I'll do my best to respond.